In the quiet suburban streets of Plainfield, Indiana, everyone believed the marriage between the corrections officer's wife and her husband was solid, built on years of shared history and predictable routine. They resided in a modest ranch house on Willow Creek Drive, a street lined with mature trees and homes displaying the quiet pride of working-class life. The husband worked a steady job at a local manufacturing plant, a man known for his quiet nature and dedication to his work. His wife served within the walls of the Indiana Department of Correction, a challenging profession that demanded discipline and emotional distance. Their lives, viewed from the outside, appeared conventional, marked by the comfortable rhythm of daily commutes, shared meals, and the quiet expectation of growing old together. The normalcy of Willow Creek Drive was shattered on the morning of specific date, October 27, 2019. A co-worker of the wife became concerned when she did not arrive for her shift at the correctional facility, a rarity for the dependable officer. Calls to her home went unanswered. Attempts to reach her husband also failed. By late morning, a welfare check was requested. Plainfield Police Department patrol units were dispatched to the Willow Creek Drive address. The front door was found unlocked, slightly ajar, a detail that immediately felt out of place in this neighborhood, where doors were habitually secured. Responding officers entered the residence with caution. The air inside was still, heavy with an unnatural silence that felt profoundly wrong. Dishes sat in the sink, remnants of breakfast left undone. The bed was unmade, suggesting a hasty or interrupted departure. There were no immediate signs of forced entry or struggle in the living room or kitchen. The house was outwardly tidy, reinforcing the unsettling contrast between the expected routine and the unsettling stillness. It was the discovery in the bedroom that transformed the welfare check into a homicide investigation. The wife lay dead in the bedroom, the scene bearing the hallmarks of extreme violence. The initial visual details were stark and immediate. Blood spatter patterns indicated the nature of the attack. Responding officers immediately secured the perimeter, establishing a crime scene and requesting detectives and forensic personnel. The uniformed officer, now a victim in her own home, was identified as place-later name, e.g., Sarah Miller. Plainfield detectives arrived quickly, the gravity of the situation palpable. The investigation into Sarah Miller's death began in earnest within the confines of her quiet suburban home. The first hours were critical and chaotic. The priority became twofold: processing the immediate crime scene with meticulous care, and locating Sarah's husband, place-titled name EGA, David Miller. Initial inquiries among neighbors yielded little. They described the couple as private but unremarkable, fitting seamlessly into the neighborhood's quiet fabric. No loud arguments had been heard, no unusual visitors noted. The initial absence of the husband was a significant point of concern, quickly elevating from a missing person inquiry to a potential suspect lead, or perhaps a second victim. The house on Willow Creek Drive became the epicenter of a rapidly expanding investigation. Investigators began the methodical process of documenting everything. Every object, every stain, every displacement was photographed and logged. The position of the body, the type of trauma sustained, and the state of the room were meticulously recorded. The initial assessment suggested the attack was sudden and brutal, likely occurring earlier that morning. The lack of forced entry raised immediate questions about who was present in the home. Was it someone known to Sarah? Someone she would have allowed inside? Or was the unlocked door a detail left by an attacker leaving the scene? As forensic technicians began their painstaking work inside the house, detectives simultaneously launched the search for David Miller. His workplace was contacted. He had not arrived for his shift. Calls to his cell phone went straight to voicemail. Family members were notified and questioned, their initial shock and disbelief quickly giving way to fear. They knew of no enemies, no recent conflicts, nothing that would explain such violence or David's disappearance. The quiet man from the manufacturing plant was now a central absent figure in a murder investigation. The search extended beyond Plainfield, alerting law enforcement agencies in neighboring communities and across Indiana. Bulletins were issued for David Miller's vehicle. Checkpoints were considered. As the day progressed, the uncertainty surrounding David's whereabouts fueled speculation. Was he a victim, abducted or harmed after witnessing the attack on his wife? Or was he the perpetrator, fleeing the consequences of an unimaginable act? The lack of any immediate lead, any sign of forced entry at the house, and the sheer brutality of the scene hung heavy in the air. deepening the mystery surrounding Sarah Miller's death and David Miller's disappearance. The quiet street held its breath, waiting for answers that the initial hours of the investigation could not provide. The undisturbed breakfast table remained, a silent witness to the morning that began normally, but ended in tragedy. The investigation into Sarah Miller's murder quickly shifted focus to locating her husband, Dave. As hours turned into the next day, his continued absence became increasingly suspicious. Law enforcement agencies across central Indiana were actively searching for his vehicle, a distinctive make and model, e.g., silver Ford F-150 pickup truck. Investigators began constructing a detailed timeline of both Sarah and David's movements in the 24 hours leading up to the discovery. This involved reviewing security camera footage from the neighborhood, businesses near their home, and potential routes David might have taken. Neighbors were re-interviewed, providing slightly more detailed observations now that the initial shock had subsided. One recalled seeing David's truck leaving the driveway early that morning, perhaps earlier than usual. Another mentioned not having seen either of them the previous evening. These small details, unremarkable on their own, began to form a mosaic of activity, or lack thereof, around the Miller home in the critical hours before the crime was discovered. The picture emerging was one of routine abruptly interrupted. Simultaneously, detectives delved into Sarah Miller's life outside her home. Her colleagues at the Indiana Department of Correction were interviewed. They described her as a dedicated and professional officer, reliable and well-respected. She worked primarily in specified area, e.g., a medium security unit, a challenging environment requiring constant vigilance and adherence to protocol. Co-workers noted she was private about her personal life, rarely discussing her marriage or home situation. This made obtaining insights into any potential stressors or conflicts she might have been experiencing more difficult. The correctional facility environment itself presented unique challenges to the investigation. The strict security protocols meant Sarah's interactions were highly regulated. Access to inmates was controlled, and relationships between staff and those incarcerated were strictly forbidden. Investigators needed to understand the nature of her work, the specific unit she was assigned to, and any particular inmates she might have had significant interaction with, while maintaining the confidentiality and security of the institution. This required careful coordination between Plainfield PD detectives and the IDOC Internal Affairs Unit. Investigators also began examining Sarah's personal communication. Her cell phone records were subpoenaed. This process, while necessary, introduced a delay as data was requested and processed. They looked for frequent contacts, unusual call times, or messages that might hint at a secret life or relationship. Her social media profiles were reviewed, although, like her work persona, her online presence appeared private and unremarkable, focused primarily on mundane aspects of daily life, offering no immediate clues to turmoil. As the search for David Miller continued, the possibility of him being a victim began to wane in the minds of the lead investigators. While not officially ruled out, the circumstances at the house, the violence directed solely at Sarah, the lack of struggle suggesting she was taken by surprise by someone she knew or trusted, the unlocked door, and David's complete disappearance, increasingly pointed towards his potential involvement. The initial profile forming was that of a domestic incident, escalating to fatal violence, followed by flight. The search expanded geographically. Plainfield is located just southwest of Indianapolis. The sprawling urban and suburban landscape offered numerous places where a vehicle could be concealed or abandoned, or where a person might attempt to disappear. Investigators focused on areas David was known to frequent or had connections to, including his workplace, known hangouts, or routes he typically took. The silver Ford F-150 became a central image in missing person alerts disseminated to the public and media. Days passed with no sign of David Miller or his truck. The initial urgency of a missing person search began to morph into a grim determination to locate a potential fugitive. The neighborhood on Willow Creek Drive remained quiet, but the sense of unease persisted. The yellow crime tape around the Miller home served as a constant, stark reminder of the violence that had erupted within its walls. The unanswered questions surrounding David's whereabouts and the motive for Sarah's brutal murder cast a long shadow over the community, highlighting the hidden complexities that can lie beneath the surface of seemingly ordinary lives. The investigation pressed forward, now increasingly focused on uncovering the secrets Sarah might have kept, and the true nature of the relationship dynamic within the Miller household. The relentless search for David Miller finally yielded a grim discovery on the third day following Sarah Miller's murder. Acting on a tip related to the description of his silver Ford F-150, law enforcement officers located the vehicle in a remote wooded area off specific road type and general location, a rural access road near Cataract Falls State Recreation Area. Approximately distance, e.g. 45 miles southwest of Plainfield. The location was isolated, accessible by a narrow, unpaved track, suggesting it was chosen specifically for its seclusion. The scene surrounding the truck provided immediate, albeit disturbing clues. The vehicle appeared to have been deliberately concealed. A perimeter was established, and forensic teams were once again called to process a potential crime scene. The body of David Miller was found near the truck. The circumstances of his death differed significantly from his wife's, suggesting a different sequence of events and perhaps a different perpetrator, though investigators were keeping all possibilities open initially. His death appeared to be a suicide, inflicted by a single gunshot wound. A firearm was recovered nearby, believed to be the weapon used. The discovery of David Miller's body in this remote location brought a new, complex layer to the investigation. It strongly suggested his direct involvement in Sarah's death. A potential murder-suicide scenario immediately became the primary focus. Investigators meticulously processed the scene, collecting the firearm, examining the truck for any trace evidence, and documenting the position of the body and surrounding area. The question was no longer where David was, but what had driven him to this desperate act, and what had happened between him and Sarah in their home on that fateful morning. The medical examiner's office began the process of conducting autopsies on both Sarah and David Miller. Sarah's autopsy confirmed the brutal nature of the attack, detailing the specific injuries and establishing a preliminary time of death. This forensic information was crucial for corroborating or refuting potential timelines being developed by detectives. David's autopsy confirmed the cause of death as a self-inflicted gunshot wound and provided an estimated time of death, allowing investigators to narrow the window between his departure from the Plainfield home and his death in the wooded area. With David Miller's death, the case would not proceed to a trial in the traditional sense, but the investigation had to continue to understand the full picture of events. The motive remained the central unanswered question. Why would a seemingly ordinary husband, known for his quiet demeanor, commit such a violent act against his wife and then take his own life? The search for answers led investigators back to Sarah Miller's life, particularly her work at the correctional facility. Were there issues there? Threats she hadn't reported? Or did the secrets lie closer to home? The analysis of Sarah Miller's cell phone records, which had been initiated earlier, began to yield significant information. The volume and frequency of calls and texts became apparent. While many were work-related or to family and friends, a pattern emerged involving communication with a number that did not belong to any known acquaintance or relative. This number was active at unusual hours, suggesting a relationship that extended beyond casual friendship or professional contact. Tracing this number became a priority. The correctional facility's internal records and visitor logs were reviewed again, this time with a specific focus on any individuals, particularly inmates, who might have had prolonged or unusual contact with Officer Sarah Miller. Investigators worked closely with IDOC to cross-reference information, looking for any inconsistencies or red flags. The quiet, unassuming life Sarah Miller presented to her neighbors and some coworkers began to show hairline cracks, hinting at a hidden complexity that the investigation was just beginning to uncover. The remote location where David was found seemed to hold the tragic endpoint, but the story of why began back in Plainfield, potentially linked to the secure world Sarah inhabited daily. The details emerging from her phone records pointed towards a clandestine connection that could explain the devastating violence. The ongoing investigation into Sarah Miller's private life, particularly her cell phone communications, began to reveal a pattern that contradicted her public image. The number identified in her call logs traced back to a prepaid cell phone, often a tool used to obscure identity. However, further investigation, cross-referencing activity logs and tower pings, linked the phone's usage to the vicinity of the correctional facility where Sarah worked. This geographical connection was a significant development, narrowing the scope of inquiry considerably. Detectives intensified their review of the correctional facility's records. While direct communication between officers and inmates is strictly regulated, clandestine relationships do occur. Investigators examined inmate call logs, visitor lists, and internal disciplinary reports, looking for any inmate who might have had frequent or unusual interactions with Officer Miller, either directly or through smuggled phones. The search for a potential connection between Sarah's hidden communications and the prison population was methodical and resource-intensive, requiring cooperation from IDOC and detailed analysis of vast amounts of data. During this phase, a crucial piece of information emerged, initially through a review of Sarah Miller's personal effects or medical records. The autopsy, combined with this information, revealed that Sarah Miller was pregnant at the time of her death. This finding immediately escalated the potential motive and recontextualized every aspect of the investigation. A pregnancy outside of her marriage to David Miller introduced the element of infidelity and paternity, providing a powerful potential trigger for domestic violence. The discovery of the pregnancy dramatically altered the investigative focus. It provided a clear, potent motive for David Miller, if he had discovered it. His subsequent suicide, found shortly after his wife's murder, now appeared less like the act of an innocent man in despair, and more like the final act of a man who had committed a heinous crime and could not face the consequences. The puzzle pieces were starting to fit, forming a devastating picture of betrayal, discovery, and fatal rage. With the pregnancy confirmed, the focus shifted to determining paternity. This required obtaining biological samples, a process that could take time. However, investigators also needed to determine if David Miller was aware of the pregnancy and, crucially, if he believed the child was not his. Evidence suggesting his awareness of the affair or the pregnancy became paramount. Had they argued about it? Had she confessed? Had he found evidence himself? The search for answers turned to examining digital devices, personal correspondence, and interviews with anyone the couple might have confided in. The analysis of Sarah Miller's prepaid cell phone number continued. Investigators worked to identify the user of that phone. This involved obtaining more detailed usage data, looking for patterns that might identify an individual, or linking the phone's activity to known associates of potential suspects. Given the geographical link to the correctional facility, the possibility that the other party was an inmate or someone connected to the prison system became a strong line of inquiry. As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered evidence suggesting Sarah Miller had been communicating regularly with an inmate within the facility where she worked. The identity of this inmate, and the nature of their relationship, became the central focus. This was the first key reveal in this midpoint section: concrete evidence of a relationship that should not have existed, a violation of the rules Sarah was sworn to uphold. This revelation provided a stark contrast to her public image as a professional, disciplined officer and highlighted the secret life she had been living. The discovery of the pregnancy, coupled with the evidence of communication with an inmate, created a devastatingly clear potential narrative. The correctional officer, involved in a forbidden relationship with an inmate, becomes pregnant. Her husband discovers the affair and the pregnancy. This discovery leads to a violent confrontation at their home in Plainfield, resulting in her murder. The husband then flees and takes his own life. This narrative, while still requiring confirmation through hard evidence, provided a strong framework for the remainder of the investigation. The focus now was on proving this sequence of events and solidifying the link between the discovered secrets and the resulting violence. The identity of the inmate and the specifics of their relationship became the next critical layer to peel back. The second key reveal, arriving close on the heels of the pregnancy confirmation and the discovery of Sarah Miller's illicit communication, centered directly on the identity of the inmate involved. Through persistent analysis of the prepaid phone's activity, cross-referencing with prison records and inmate call patterns, investigators identified the individual Sarah Miller had been secretly communicating with. He was an inmate serving a lengthy sentence at the same correctional facility where Sarah worked. His name was placeholder name, James Sterling. The nature of their communication became increasingly clear. It was not merely casual contact. The volume and content of messages and calls indicated a deeply personal, romantic relationship. This was a severe breach of protocol for a correctional officer and a profound betrayal of her marriage vows. The relationship, conducted in secrecy, had developed within the confines of the prison system, leveraging Sarah's position to facilitate communication. Investigators delved into James Sterling's background. He was incarcerated for general type of crime, a violent offense, his history painting a picture of someone outside the bounds of law-abiding society. What was the dynamic of this relationship? How had it begun? Was he aware of Sarah's marriage? Was he aware of her pregnancy? Did he believe the child was his? These questions added layers of complexity. though the immediate focus remained on the impact this revelation had on David Miller. The critical piece of the puzzle was determining when and how David Miller discovered the affair and the pregnancy. Investigators searched the Miller home again, focusing on digital devices, physical mail, or any personal items that might contain evidence of David's discovery. They reviewed his computer and phone data, looking for search history related to his wife's activities, texts or emails between Sarah and David that mentioned conflict, or any communication that indicated rising suspicion or confrontation. Simultaneously, interviews with family and close friends of both Sarah and David were recontextualized with the new information. Had David mentioned any concerns about Sarah's work or her behavior? Had he expressed doubts about their marriage? Had Sarah confided in anyone about difficulties at home or about her relationship with the inmate? These interviews, though often yielding only subtle clues due to the couple's private nature, were crucial for building a picture of the domestic environment leading up to the murders. The evidence suggesting David's discovery began to mount. Analysis of his computer showed recent search history related to cell phone tracing and infidelity. Financial records indicated he may have accessed records that revealed the prepaid phone number or its usage patterns. While the exact moment and method of his discovery remained somewhat obscured by the absence of a living witness, the digital footprint left behind strongly indicated he had uncovered the truth about Sarah's affair. The pregnancy was the undeniable physical manifestation of the betrayal. For David Miller, discovering his wife was not only having an affair but was pregnant with another man's child would represent a devastating blow to his marriage, his sense of identity, and his future. This provided the powerful emotional catalyst that investigators believed explained the extreme violence directed at Sarah and his subsequent suicide. The motive was rooted in profound personal betrayal and the destruction of his expected life. Investigators worked to construct the final hours within the Miller home. The forensic evidence from the bedroom, including the nature of Sarah's injuries and the state of the scene, was consistent with a sudden, explosive act of violence, likely following a heated confrontation. The timeline placed David at the home during the critical window when the murder occurred. His immediate disappearance and subsequent suicide in an isolated location further supported the conclusion that he was the perpetrator, acting in response to his discovery. While the primary narrative focused on David's actions, investigators still had to fully understand the extent of Sarah's relationship with the inmate. Was James Sterling aware of Sarah's pregnancy? Did he play any role, however indirect, in the events that transpired? Interviews with James Sterling, conducted within the confines of the prison, provided his perspective, although this information was treated with caution given his incarcerated status and potential motivations. His account of the relationship and his knowledge of Sarah's personal life became another piece of the complex narrative. The midpoint reveals solidified the motive and identified the key players, shifting the investigation from finding a killer to reconstructing the precise sequence of events triggered by hidden lives colliding with brutal reality. With the motive firmly established around David Miller's discovery of his wife's affair and pregnancy, the investigation focused on corroborating the sequence of events and cementing the timeline. Forensic analysis from the Plainfield home crime scene became paramount. The blood spatter patterns, the nature of the wounds sustained by Sarah Miller, and trace evidence collected all pointed towards a violent attack, consistent with a close-quarters struggle or ambush. The specific type of weapon used was identified through forensic examination of the wounds, narrowing the search for the murder weapon. Investigators continued to build the timeline of David Miller's movements. On the morning of October 20, witness statements from neighbors who saw his truck, combined with data from traffic cameras and cell tower pings from his phone before it was likely turned off, helped track his path after leaving the Plainfield residence. The route taken towards the remote location where his body and truck were found was analyzed. It was not his usual commute, suggesting a deliberate attempt to find seclusion. The firearm recovered near David Miller's body was a critical piece of evidence. Ballistics testing would determine if this weapon was the one used in Sarah Miller's murder. This testing process is meticulous, involving comparing unique markings left on bullets and shell casings. If the ballistics matched the evidence found at the Plainfield home, it would definitively link David Miller to his wife's death, solidifying the murder-suicide conclusion. The results of this testing were highly anticipated by the investigative team. Further examination of David Miller's digital devices and personal effects continued to reveal details about his state of mind in the days and hours leading up to the murders. Beyond the search history related to infidelity, Investigators found notes or drafts of messages that hinted at his distress, his feelings of betrayal, and his contemplation of drastic action. These findings, while not direct evidence of the murder itself, painted a chilling picture of his emotional state after discovering his wife's secrets. The investigation also circled back to Sarah Miller's life within the correctional facility, focusing on the period leading up to her death. Interviews with more of her colleagues aimed to uncover any subtle changes in her behavior, any signs of stress, or any indication that her secret relationship might have been nearing exposure. While her colleagues largely maintained she was private, small details emerged, perhaps a change in demeanor, unexplained absences, or subtle conflicts that were previously overlooked. These observations, while not definitive, contributed to understanding the pressure Sarah might have been under. The inmate, James Sterling, continued to be a tangential figure in the primary murder investigation, though central to understanding the motive. Investigators sought to confirm his knowledge of Sarah's marriage and pregnancy through interviews and any available records of his communications. Did he pressure Sarah? Did he have expectations about their relationship or the child? While his role was not that of a direct perpetrator in the murders of Sarah and David Miller, his relationship with Sarah was the catalyst that set the tragic events in motion. His perspective added another layer to the complex web of relationships and secrets. Evidence relating to the pregnancy was also meticulously reviewed. Medical records, if available, provided a time frame for the pregnancy, allowing investigators to estimate when conception occurred and by extension for how long Sarah might have been aware. This information was crucial for understanding the potential timeline of when David might have discovered the pregnancy relative to when it began, and how long the secret had been kept. The cumulative evidence, the discovery of David's suicide, the physical evidence at the Plainfield home, the analysis of Sarah's communications, the confirmation of her pregnancy, David's digital footprint revealing his discovery, and the expected ballistics match, converged to form a clear, albeit tragic, narrative. The quiet husband from Plainfield, driven by the devastating discovery of his wife's affair with a prison inmate and her resulting pregnancy, had committed murder before taking his own life. The investigation shifted from gathering initial facts to meticulously assembling the evidence to support this conclusion. The focus now was on completing the forensic analysis and compiling the case file, even without a living suspect to apprehend or interrogate further. The silence from the Miller home on Willow Creek Drive was now permanent, replaced by the quiet hum of investigative work confirming the grim reality. The ballistics report arrived, providing a definitive link between David Miller and the murder of his wife. The firearm recovered near his body in the wooded area matched the bullet recovered from the crime scene at the Plainfield home. This forensic confirmation was the final piece of irrefutable evidence solidifying the conclusion that David Miller had shot and killed his wife, Sarah Miller. The trajectory of the investigation was now complete. The primary perpetrator was identified, albeit deceased. With the core facts established, Sarah Miller was murdered by her husband, David Miller, who then committed suicide. The focus of the investigation shifted to documenting the case thoroughly for closure and to inform the public and the affected family. While there would be no trial, the process required compiling all evidence, witness statements, forensic reports, and digital analysis into a comprehensive case file. This file would stand as the official record of the events of October 20. Investigators revisited the timeline, refining the sequence of events based on the precise times of death estimated by the medical examiner, and the data from cell towers and security footage. It appeared David Miller confronted Sarah about the affair and pregnancy early that morning, the confrontation escalating rapidly into violence. His departure from the home shortly after the murder, followed by his drive to the remote location, and his subsequent suicide, formed a chilling, albeit concise, sequence of actions driven by despair and rage. Further analysis into the specifics of Sarah Miller's relationship with the inmate, James Sterling, continued, not for the purpose of charging Sterling with any crime related to the murders, but to fully understand the context and catalyst. It was confirmed that Sterling was aware of his relationship with Sarah, but the extent of his knowledge regarding her marriage or pregnancy remained less clear from his perspective. His account, filtered through the context of his incarceration and situation, could not be fully verified but added texture to the hidden world Sarah had inhabited. The impact of the investigation extended into the correctional facility. While the specific details of Sarah Miller's actions and her relationship with an inmate were sensitive, the incident highlighted the inherent challenges and risks within the corrections profession. particularly regarding the strict boundaries required between staff and the incarcerated population. Internal reviews and procedural checks would likely follow to examine how such a relationship could develop undetected. The families of both Sarah and David Miller were left to grapple with the devastating reality. Sarah's family had lost a daughter, a sister, a corrections officer, under horrific circumstances, followed by the shock of her husband's involvement in suicide, and the revelation of her secret life and pregnancy. David's family faced the unimaginable truth of their son, their brother, a seemingly quiet man, being capable of such violence and self-destruction. The dual tragedies left deep wounds, compounded by the public nature of the case and the sensational details that emerged. The community of Plainfield, Indiana, slowly began to process the events that had shattered its sense of quiet security. The house on Willow Creek Drive, once just another home, became a landmark associated with tragedy. The yellow tape was eventually removed, but the memory of the investigation and the grim discoveries lingered. The case served as a stark reminder that appearances can be deceiving, and that profound secrets can lie hidden beneath the surface of ordinary lives, with devastating consequences. The official case file was compiled, detailing every step of the investigation, every piece of evidence collected, and the conclusions reached. It documented the initial welfare check, the discovery of Sarah Miller's murder, the search for and discovery of David Miller's body and suicide, the forensic findings linking David to the murder, the revelation of Sarah's secret relationship and pregnancy, and the established motive rooted in David's discovery of this betrayal. While the legal case was closed due to the perpetrator's death, the factual reconstruction provided clarity on the events. The detailed analysis of the evidence, though clinical in its presentation, spoke volumes about the emotional turmoil that must have preceded the violence. The formal conclusion of the investigation brought a degree of factual resolution, but offered little comfort to those impacted. The motive was clear: betrayal and the violent reaction to it. The perpetrators were identified: David Miller, first as a murderer, then as a suicide victim, but the why extended beyond a simple explanation of motive, delving into the complex, hidden lives of individuals who presented one face to the world while concealing another. The case stood as a grim testament to the destructive power of secrets kept, truths revealed, and the catastrophic breakdown of trust within a marriage. The quiet streets of Plainfield would eventually return to their rhythm, but the echoes of the violence that occurred on Willow Creek Drive would remain, a haunting reminder of the lives lost and the secrets they held. The comprehensive case file provided a detailed account of the evidence that led investigators to conclude David Miller murdered his wife Sarah Miller. The forensic report on the firearm, recovered near David's body, confirmed it was a specific type of firearm, e.g., 9mm handgun. Shell casings found at the Plainfield residence were also confirmed to have been fired from this weapon. This ballistic match was the strongest physical link between David and the crime scene, placing the murder weapon directly in his possession shortly after his wife's death. The medical examiner's report on Sarah Miller further detailed the nature of her injuries, consistent with being shot multiple times, indicating the ferocity of the attack. The estimated time of death aligned with the timeline constructed by investigators, placing the murder in the early morning hours before the welfare check. Evidence gathered from David Miller's digital footprint was also critical. Beyond the search history related to infidelity and cell phone tracking, analysis of his personal computer revealed documents or saved web pages related to Sarah's workplace, the Indiana Department of Correction. This suggested he may have been attempting to learn more about her activities there, or potentially identify individuals she worked with or supervised. His access to this information could have provided the initial suspicion or evidence that prompted him to investigate further. Investigators were able to confirm David Miller's awareness of Sarah's pregnancy through multiple avenues. While the exact moment of discovery remained known only to David and Sarah, evidence such as opened medical bills or printouts of lab results found among David's belongings indicated he had come across physical proof of the pregnancy. Furthermore, communication records between Sarah and David, while not explicitly detailing a confession, showed an increase in tension or distance in the days leading up to the murder, hinting at marital discord related to a significant undisclosed issue. One specific piece of digital evidence, a draft email or note found on David's phone that was never sent, expressed feelings of betrayal and confusion regarding their future, clearly referencing a life-altering secret Sarah was keeping. The timeline refined placed David Miller's truck leaving the Plainfield residence shortly after the estimated time of Sarah's death. Security footage from a nearby business confirmed the truck's direction of travel, leading towards the rural area where his body was found. The remote location, requiring a deliberate turn off the main road and onto an unpaved track, reinforced the conclusion that his arrival there was intentional, chosen for its isolation. The scene itself, with the parked truck and David's body nearby, bore the hallmarks of a planned suicide following the murder. The investigation into Sarah Miller's relationship with inmate James Sterling provided crucial context for David's motive. While Sterling was an inmate with a criminal history, the focus remained on his relationship with Sarah as the catalyst for the domestic tragedy. Interviews with Sterling confirmed a consensual, though forbidden, relationship had developed over time. He stated he believed Sarah was unhappy in her marriage, but his knowledge of the specifics of her relationship with David, or the timeline of her pregnancy, remained ambiguous or self-serving in his accounts. No evidence was found to suggest Sterling had any direct involvement in planning or executing the murders. His role was limited to being the other party in the affair that triggered David's actions. The completed case file detailed the meticulous steps taken by the Plainfield Police Department and assisting agencies. It included crime scene photographs, forensic analysis reports, witness statements, digital evidence logs, medical examiner reports, and the timeline of events. This comprehensive documentation served not only as the official record, but also as a necessary step for providing clarity to the grieving families and the public. The process adhered strictly to legal and procedural guidelines, ensuring the findings were based on corroborated evidence, even in the absence of a judicial process. The investigation revealed the stark contrast between the public facade of the Miller marriage and the hidden turmoil beneath. Sarah Miller, the professional corrections officer, maintained a secret relationship that violated her profession's core rules. David Miller, the quiet husband, harbored feelings of betrayal that culminated in fatal violence. The pregnancy, a symbol of potential new life, became the tragic trigger for death. The details uncovered, though clinical in their presentation within the case file, painted a haunting picture of lives irrevocably altered by choice and consequence. The official finding concluded that David Miller committed homicide followed by suicide. The case was formally closed by the Plainfield Police Department. The conclusion based on the overwhelming weight of forensic evidence, digital trails, and the timeline of events. The final report documented the cause and manner of both deaths and the established motive rooted in the discovery of the affair and pregnancy. While the legal process concluded swiftly due to David's death, the human story lingered, a narrative of shattered trust, devastating secrets, and the final irreversible acts of violence. The quiet streets of Plainfield absorbed the shock, left with the grim understanding of the hidden realities that can exist behind closed doors. The aftermath of the investigation left a profound silence in Plainfield, Indiana, a silence that felt heavier than before the events of October. The Miller home on Willow Creek Drive remained empty, a physical void mirroring the emotional one left in the community and among the families. The personal belongings inside became static artifacts of lives that ended violently. Neighbors walked by the house with averted gazes, the mundane street forever marked by the tragedy that occurred within one of its seemingly ordinary homes. For Sarah Miller's family, the grief was layered and complex. They mourned the loss of their daughter and sister under unimaginable circumstances. The revelation of her secret relationship and pregnancy added confusion and pain to their sorrow, forcing them to reconcile the woman they knew with the hidden life she led. They had to grapple with the fact that her own choices had, in part, created the volatile situation that led to her death. Though nothing could ever justify the violence inflicted upon her, their focus shifted to quietly honoring her memory. While processing the shocking truths that emerged from the investigation, David Miller's family faced their own devastating reality. They mourned the loss of a husband, son, and brother, but this grief was inextricably linked to the horror of his actions. The man they knew, quiet and seemingly stable, had committed murder before taking his own life. The evidence presented in the case file, while explaining the motive, could not fully explain how the man they loved was capable of such an act. They were left with the impossible task of reconciling the person they knew with the perpetrator revealed by the investigation, navigating their own grief amidst the community's shock and judgment. The correctional facility where Sarah Miller worked also felt the impact. The incident served as a stark reminder of the ethical complexities and inherent dangers of the profession. While Officer Miller's actions were a clear violation of protocol, the human element of her story, the development of a forbidden relationship within the confines of the institution, prompted reflection on supervision, officer well-being, and the potential for personal lives to intersect destructively with the professional environment. Security protocols were reviewed, and the incident served as a cautionary tale discussed in hushed tones within the secure walls. The inmate, James Sterling, remained incarcerated, his role in the tragedy confined to being the catalyst. The relationship he had with Sarah Miller, conducted through clandestine means, led indirectly to the violence outside the prison walls. While legally absolved of involvement in the murders, his life continued within the system, marked by this strange and tragic connection to the world outside that ended so violently. His perspective, captured in interviews, offered a glimpse into the forbidden dynamic that had unfolded in secrecy. The official case file, though comprehensive and factual, stood as a somber record of a private catastrophe made public. It detailed the step-by-step uncovering of secrets, the affair, the pregnancy, the husband's discovery, and the violent outcome. It was a testament to the meticulous nature of forensic investigation and procedural work, piecing together the truth from silent evidence left behind. The clinical language of the reports contrasted sharply with the raw, devastating human emotions that fueled the events and were the lasting legacy of the case. The narrative of Sarah and David Miller became a cautionary tale in the community, spoken about in hushed tones, a reminder that even in the most ordinary-seeming lives, hidden currents can run deep and dark, capable of erupting with terrifying force. The quiet of Plainfield was restored physically, but the psychological impact lingered. The case underscored the fragility of trust, the destructive power of secrets, and the irreversible consequences of betrayal and violence. It was a grim illustration of how personal choices, made in secrecy, can have devastating ripple effects, shattering lives and leaving behind only questions of what if, and the haunting reality of what occurred. The end of the investigation brought no true closure, only the cold, hard facts of a tragedy born from hidden lives and violent ends, leaving a permanent mark on a quiet suburban street. The silence that fell over Willow Creek Drive was a heavy one, burdened by the weight of unimaginable loss and the chilling knowledge of the darkness that had erupted there.